really great to be here again. I had a wonderful time when I was here last year speaking. Who am I talking to this time? Grad students?
These are all the graduate
all the
students.
Grad students, okay. So graduate degrees in PR, is that, or any different?
They're graduate degrees in public relations, health communication, integrated marketing communication. Oh, and I should introduce, I'm so sorry, we have a very special guest tonight. We have the Vice President for Graduate and Professional Studies with us tonight, Eric Turner. Thank you for coming, Eric. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Okay, so PR, health communications, you said integrated marketing.
Yes.
Communications. So honestly, I think I know the difference between all of those things, but once you get into the agency world, it gets a little bit blurred. Sometimes the lines of what you're asked to do. But feel free, as we go through the presentation, to ask any questions as it might apply to your specific discipline, and I believe there's time afterward, of course, for questions.
Thank you.
All right. So why data matter? And I will say, because I was having someone proof the presentation before, when you're talking to a data person, you should recognize the word data is actually plural. So I know sometimes it looks weird when I say why data matters. But most people will say that that's wrong when you say why data matter, but in this case I added the S at the end because I think it's easier to read. Most people just like seeing it that way. So when we think about the various sort of, I guess, intellectual changes that have had a big impression on PR over the last decade or so, I want to think back just a little bit. So when I started out in public relations, entry level, very first job, assistant account executive, the big shift in thinking when it came to PR was online media. And I think it's difficult, I think sometimes for people of your age to realize just how young the internet actually is. So I'm still in my 30s for context, and online media was new for the PR field when I got started. Everything was about newspaper, magazine, broadcast, and then all of a sudden we started finding that we just weren't getting coverage in those types of outlets anymore. Those types of outlets were closing, and everything was shifting to online publications or the online properties of traditional publications. So if you can imagine, back when I started in PR about 12, 13 years ago, that was the big shift in the way we were practicing. That was what was changing, how we were pitching media, thinking about the types of outlets that we were showing up in. It was a challenge because there wasn't really a way at that time to measure unique visitors per month or how many people were visiting websites. So we were stuck in this area of trying to secure coverage for our clients in online media because we needed to be there, that's where everyone was, but not actually being able to report on how we were doing in that field because there was no really good way to measure it. So move forward probably about 5 years, the next big shift in how we thought about public relations was the rise in influencer engagement. Social media is what made this possible. So it's now not so much about engaging with prominent journalists or the top publications in the field. It's about tapping into influencers, people who are maybe only part-time bloggers or who make an entire career out of having an Instagram account. These are vital, vital outlets in getting our information to the right customers. And once again, with social media changing every day, things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal a year ago, which has made my life a disaster as Facebook has just shut down everything. Once again, we're in one of these places where we can't really measure the number of people who are seeing our message. Yes, we can still capture things like follower accounts, how many people you're following on Instagram, but it's really difficult to actually reconcile a follower account with the number of people who have actually seen a message. Any of you who use Instagram a lot know that a lot of the content is shifting to Instagram stories as opposed to actual posts in Instagram, and there is no way to measure Instagram stories and who saw them. So once again, we are finding ourselves in a position of getting coverage in a vitally important outlet through influencers on social media and having no way to measure it, to report that back to the client. So this is where data can come in and help. And it's about coaching your clients, teaching them that there are additional ways beyond demonstrating impressions in traditional media or viewers or social media followers to demonstrate that you have actually gotten your message through to your consumer. So this is now when we talk about a third wave of what is changing the way we think about PR, it's actually data and analytics. This article here back from November of 17, any of you who, or anyone who was in the agency world for 2017 can tell you that it was a really, really tough year to be on the agency side. There were a lot of factors and clients taking a lot of their business in-house, pulling away from agency shops. And we probably hadn't had such a difficult year since 2008, 2009, since the Great Recession. So through a number of factors, 2017 was really, really tough for a lot of us. A lot of the biggest agencies, Omnicom, WPP, all of the holding companies saw drops in revenue. And even throughout all of that, PR companies were still hiring. And the one place they were hiring was around data and analytics, because they were starting to realize that this was the future of how they need to be communicating with their clients. Not only were their clients asking them about these types of skill sets, they were realizing when they brought data and analytics to bear for their clients, they were able to break through, actually secure some business wins in a year that was particularly trying for the industry. So even when your peers were maybe trying to get a job at agencies and having trouble, if you had that specialty in analytics, data, or even research, you would find that there were a lot more openings for that particular field. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. SPAR, I'll explain what that acronym means in a minute. And then I'm going to take you through a couple of case studies here in these 4 particular areas. We're going to talk about account planning, optimizing campaign performance through data and analytics, integrating social and digital metrics into measurement and reporting, and then hypothesis testing and validating. So this last little bullet here, new since the last time I made this presentation. I also do quite a bit of custom research through my job. And in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of success integrating traditional research methods with social and data analytics to really help back up, validate some of the findings where people were kind of starting to try to poke holes in it. So SPAR. And the reason I bring this up, SPAR stands for Strategic Planning, Analytics, and Research. So that's essentially my job title. And the only reason I put it up here is because back when I started in the business, I did pretty much the same thing I do now. I mean, the tools were different. There's more information available today. But I did essentially the same job, and nobody knew what to call it. I went from not really having a job title to having really awful job titles, like knowledge leadership was one of them. One of the more, I cringe when I hear it. It's just so ivory tower. It's terrible. I went to research and insights, was kind of the next job title I had. Then my job title was account planner. That one came about because ad shops for a long time have had people who really try to get inside the consumer head, and that person is the account planner. They're the one who delivers a brief over to what you might think of as your more traditional creatives who actually put pen to paper for the copywriting or come up with a concept. So through all of those titles, knowledge leadership, research and insights, account planning, this is where we've landed today. Strategic planning, analytics, and research. So they're just going to throw it all up there and call me all of that. And so I lead this up for the Boston office in Cone, and Cone, as of about a year and a half ago, became part of the Porter Novelli family of agencies. Has anybody heard of Porter Novelli? It's one of the, if you think of like the big PR shops out there, it's like Edelman, Ketchum, Fleischmann Hiller, Porter Novelli. Those are kind of the big ones out in the industry. So they bought out Cone about a year and a half ago for our specialty in corporate social responsibility. And so now I lead up strategic planning, analytics, and research for, I'd say, most of our Northeast clients, but I also have clients on the West Coast. So it's just kind of a catch-all now for everything that we're doing in this business. But it's nice to have a title, better than knowledge leadership. So what do I do all day? So I apply data to the traditional ways that we practice PR to make the information more insightful, to make it smarter, to help us get through to the client better. So what does that look like? Probably 5-10 years ago, when you talk to a client about who is their target audience, they would say something like men, 35 to 54. So this was when we were pitching a consumer electronics brand, like personal electronics music, headphones. I won't say who it is, but it was headphones. And so we had to diagnose who exactly is their target audience so we could develop a pitch for them. Men 35 to 54. Now, maybe to you that sounds fairly specific, but in reality, it doesn't tell you much about your target audience at all. I mean, you know they're not female and they're not outside that age range, but there's just so many more layers of who the particular audience is for this headphone brand. So through applying data and analytics, we were able to diagnose a little bit more specifically both who this brand's target audience is and who the potential target audience is. And I can talk about some of these tools more if you have questions, but this is basically a cluster analysis of the people who follow this particular brand on social media. So what it does is we can go in and say, based on who these people are following on social media, what they talk about on social media, how they explain themselves in their bios, we're actually able to group them into little personas. And this here allows us to understand who it is that follows a particular brand on social media. It could also be who follows a particular issue. So, I could put in Nike here and we could understand and break this out for Nike, but I could also put in something like sneakers and understand who follows that. So what we found out about this brand, it's a very, very high-end headphone brand that wanted to break through to men, 35 to 54, that because of the quality of the electronics and technology within these headphones, because of the attention to detail paid when they're creating the products, this is a brand that's very highly prized by audiophiles. So we're talking like the geekiest of tech geeks when it comes to listening to music. So this is not just your average person who's listening to their phone on the T, walking to work, whatever the case may be. I mean, we're talking like that 1% of people who could talk your ear off about the sound quality. So this is the world that they are currently existing in. What we wanted to demonstrate was, that's great, you don't want to alienate this audience, but you're not breaking through to the average person that you want to break through. So we're talking about the people on the T, people who are buying these headphones to listen to at the gym or just casually. In no way are you breaking through to these people, because right now this is seen as a brand that's exclusive to audiophiles. And what we wanted to demonstrate to them is that people like sports and entertainment fans, music fans, these are people who probably couldn't tell you very much about sound quality. I mean, they know if something sounds good, something sounds bad, but they're probably buying headphones more off of a brand name than they are, decibels or any of those words that go into talking about sound quality. And right now, none of those people are following that brand. So what we were actually able to do is break down what does it mean to be a man 35 to 54 to say, okay, now we need to further segment that audience, and we know that we need to start going after sports enthusiasts, that we need to start going after music enthusiasts. Are we thinking about maybe partnering with Spotify, trying to do some work at music festivals, really tapping into a different group of people. This here really shaped the type of plan that we were able to put in front of that client. And imagine if we had just walked in with men 35 to 54, that's so vague. I mean, who knows what we would have gone in and talked with them about, but we were able to really pinpoint a particular plan for them and back it up with this research. So data and analytics are definitely changing the way we look at target audiences. The next example here, you guys know what this is? Anyone? Just a media list, right? So this is probably one of the most basic things that any entry-level PR person will do. If you've had internships, you may have already done this. It's just making a media list. It's really not that big a deal. It's finding journalists who have the right beats, doing a little bit of research, making sure that they have written about or would be receptive to writing about whatever it is your pitch. It's bare bones, 101 PR, not particularly interesting. It's just one of the things you do when you're in this field. But through data and analytics, we have actually made over the media list. So nowadays, it's not about the spreadsheet where we're presenting all of the contact information. It's actually looking at all of the reporters and plotting them on maps based on reach, the size of the audience that is reading them, relevance, how often they're talking about your particular topic, and then resonance, which is just our fancy word for how many times people engage with their comment, share their content or like it on a social channel. So now oftentimes we are taking media lists and plotting them on charts like this, so that we can go to our clients and say something like, okay, well, this person here, I guess Simon Mainwaring, that's really where you want to be. He's got a lot of relevance for the topic, he's got a huge audience, but just beware, he doesn't really have a ton of resonance. So people aren't gonna necessarily engage with this content, but you definitely wanna hit it. Look at someone up there like Devin Thorpe. That guy's really, someone with a lot of relevance, someone that people are going to engage with, not as far of a reach. So these are some of the trade-offs that you're making with media. So nowadays, all of our media lists often are plotted on maps like this. We also go through and demonstrate the actual influence of overall publications. So when clients come to us and say, okay, well, why should I pitch my tennis shoes in Hypebeast or Runner's World, or you're giving me this list of 30 different publications, which one should be my top 5 priority publications? We're actually able to go through, use data to demonstrate scores across reach, amplification, engagement, content, audience, and then create an overall influence score. So this is a study I do for a lot of our clients. So for this particular shoe company, it's not even a shoe company, it's a shoe component company, we know that Hypebeast, Runner's World, Soul Collector, High Sobriety, and Sneaker News are the top 5 publications that they need to be going after. Does anybody read those publications? All right, so we have an enthusiast here. All right. We talk about reporting, and I kind of talked about this off the top. Reporting, wrap-up presentations that we give to clients at the end of a campaign or at the end of the year traditionally look like we secured this many placements for this many potential impressions, and here's a logo soup of mastheads that we have appeared in. But nowadays, reporting looks like this. It's done in real time, and we don't wait till the end of a campaign to share it. Clients can click in and look at dashboards anytime, whenever they want. So it just makes it more stressful for us when they pick up the phone and say, what happened here? What's with that spike? But everything now is about dashboards that are showing movement over time, and probably clients will take these and superimpose things like sales data, traffic to a website over these spikes to see if PR actually had a role in driving any of those bottom line goals. So I hope this shows you, this is kind of if we look at 3 fairly traditional PR roles, defining a target audience, creating a media list, campaign reporting, data and analytics have really upped the game a lot, to the point where its clients are kind of asking us for this type of information, and so it's shifting the way a lot of things have traditionally looked in the field for a long time. Questions before I start going into some case studies?
How would you define an impression?
Tell me what client you're talking about and I'll tell you how we define an impression. It's different for every single one. So impressions traditionally in our world just mean a potential eyeball. So someone who could possibly have seen your placement in a traditional media outlet or on social. Every single client, though, has a different way of defining how to calculate impressions. The Institute for Public Relations official guidelines will say that an impression should just be newspaper circulation, it should just be broadcast viewers, and it should be a single day's worth of online traffic. So that's unique visitors per month divided by 30. Now, I have clients who have page-long formulas for how they define impressions, 7 days worth of online viewers or 1/3 of Facebook viewers. So, but overall, an impression is a potential eyeball who could have seen your information. Every single client calculates it differently.
So do you find yourself trying to manage their expectations on what they believe impressions are? Because you wouldn't want to be talking apples to oranges, I'm assuming? And does that go into the initial sale of a pitch of, these are the data points that we can give you, but let's talk about the specifics on how you're going to read that data?
Yep, absolutely, and that's a good question, because when I go in and sell how we're going to report to a client, the last thing I want to do is sell them that we're going to be reporting impressions, because I think impressions are quickly going to become a thing of the past. Media are continuing to shut down. Social media are clamping down on privacy. We're getting less and less data from the API, so we have fewer numbers, and it's now more about the quality of the placement as opposed to the number of them. And that is a very challenging conversation to have with a lot of clients who just want billions of impressions. It doesn't really matter where they show up, they just want them, to the point where we have some clients that we have to count press release pickup. I mean, how many of you have gone to businesswire.com on a regular basis and read through all of the press releases that come up? No one. No one has done it. I'm in PR. I don't do that. I've written a handful of press releases. I've never read a press release. And yet for clients, we have to report every little site that picks those up. And it's about coaching them that impressions are, they're a fine metric. I understand that you've historically tracked them and we can continue to do so over time. And we'll calculate them the way that you're used to doing it, or we can provide a recommendation about how we feel it's best to calculate them. But today, it's so much more important to be looking at things like traffic to websites, shift in perception, all of these types of behavioral and attitudinal changes in the end consumer, as opposed to media metrics. Have you guys heard the term vanity metrics? That's often what placements and impressions are. They're just vanity metrics, because you can really, really make those numbers look big, but at the end of the day, if no one feels any different about your brand or product, what does it really
matter? I'm related to what you were saying at the end. I think one of the issues that is happening with a lot of these companies are changing the way they're presenting their data. Every time you're a company, you try to invest in a way that, how can you track your customer, what customer segment you're trying to go behind them. For example, in the way people used to do it before Instagram stories is different than how it's done today. And with a lot of the privacy settings changing as well, how as a company can you go around that and have a specific way on not having to redo all of that again in terms of...
Yeah. You have to be nimble when it comes to data, because it's always going to change. The only way to really be prepared for that is to just be prepared to change. So literally since let's see if I can remember the exact time frame, in, I want to say maybe November of last year, Facebook announced that it was shutting down pretty much all of access to Instagram. Which means that the social listening tools that I use can't scrape Instagram and give me all of the numbers about people who are talking about anything. I can't even collect the actual posts that mention your brand in them anymore. So that, I think I heard about that in November, October, November. The changes in the social platforms came in December. And so we had to communicate to all of our clients that, hey, I know you're used to getting a list of every Instagram mention that has your brand in it. That's not going to happen anymore. Not possible. It's not me, it's not my tool. It's just not possible. You need to get over that now because we can't report these numbers anymore. And now, as of the beginning of this month, Facebook has now allowed us, it's turned back on a function that's allowing us to track hashtags. So now, if we can demonstrate that we have an admin role on a Facebook business account, it has to be a Facebook business account, linked to an Instagram business account, I can track up to 30 hashtags for your brand. So that's sort of like, it's changing every single day. I have to communicate that to the client every single day. I have ones who expect us to do year-over-year reporting that I have to go to and say, your impressions numbers will be gone for this year, because where we may have tracked thousands of Instagram posts for you for your big event last year, we will have none of that this year. You know, maybe a few hashtags when people use the hashtags, but it's all going to be gone. So the only way to prepare for data is just to realize that it's constantly going to change, and to rely less and less on those vanity metrics, impressions and placements, and more on actual attitudinal and behavioral change, because it's the only thing that is yet to actually go away that we can still access. I'll get into a few case studies now. So first is account planning. So this is the first thing that we do when it comes to working with either a new client, maybe it's a client that we're trying to pitch and win the business, or it's an existing client and every single year they go into planning. So all of my clients, they haven't started yet, are soon doing their 2020 or maybe even 2021 planning. And so account planning is where we actually sit down, try to define an insight about a target audience that will help us put together a plan for that individual client. So this is where social data actually can play a huge role, because one of the hardest things that you're going to have to learn to do in PR is tell your client that they're wrong. And you actually have to do that quite a lot, and they're not going to believe you that you're wrong unless you have some sort of data to back it up. Food and beverage client that we work with right now came to us about a year ago saying that they wanted us to build communication strategy. They wanted us to use traditional media and mommy bloggers to talk about the brand's commitment to sustainability, and recycling and the environment. So basically they said, this is exactly how we want you to reach our consumer. Go off and come together with a plan. However, what we found when we did a quick audit of the brand, they were an existing client, so we had a lot of this data in-house. We did an audit of how traditional media talk about this brand. And you can see, red being negative, that quite often, at least 50% of the time, when media talk about this brand, it's negative. And it's like way negative, like dark red negative. Entire articles about how awful this brand is, specific to its sustainability. This is traditional media. So you remember the brand asked us to use traditional media, print, online, broadcast. We looked at social media, and what is that, like 3/4 of the time when people talk about this brand on social media, Twitter, Instagram, back in the day when we could read Instagram, it's really positive. So consumers, the brand and traditional media care a lot about sustainability. The consumers really don't. They just like this product. They have a lot of brand advocates. And when they talk about them on social media, they're likely to do so in a really positive way. I mean, there are people who will every single day go and say, talk about how they're using this particular product. So a lot of really strong consumer sentiment. Now you remember the brand also wanted us to use mommy bloggers because they felt that they really wanted to reach that particular segment to get out their sustainability message. So you remember this is the cluster analysis of social followers. All the people who follow this brand, and these two here, these are mommy bloggers and coupon bloggers. And I don't know if you can really tell, but they're kind of clustered off on this island. And so what that means is that the people who are mommy bloggers talk to themselves, but they don't really talk to anyone else. So like the more intertwined the clusters are, the more those people talk to each other. So what is this telling you? Mommy bloggers only talk to themselves. So that's great tight-knit community for moms who really follow these women and some daddy bloggers out there, but they're not getting the message out to anyone else. So we were able to just blow a hole in that brand's entire strategy. First of all, traditional media enjoy talking poorly about you, and mommy bloggers aren't really reaching the majority of your consumers. So through presenting this information, we were able to put a plan in place that leveraged more social, allowing those people to spread the brand message. Didn't use mommy bloggers at all. But as you can see here, like we were able to take the entire strategy or the approach that that client gave us and just completely sweep it away and put something better in front of them. So quite often you would find that a client will come to you telling you exactly what they want, and you have to go back and say, no, that's wrong. And this is a good way to be able to demonstrate exactly why you're putting the strategy in front of them that you are. Another example of that, this is a vitamin brand, and they were launching a new line of gummy vitamins. That's like the new cool way to take your vitamin now is gummies, which is fun. They're yummy. It tastes like gummy bears. But you can only have 2 a day, unfortunately. But anyway, so gummies are the new cool way to take vitamins. So this brand came to us and said that we need help launching this new line of gummies for it's the same thing as our traditional pill, but it's the gummy version now. And also, oh by the way, we're a brand that has a long history of doing good things in our community. So we want you to talk that up, and we want you to use brand and product ambassadors. So people who are really, really super excited about vitamins, we want you to tap into them to share our message. So once again, we went back to the data. So this here is a revenue breakdown of all nutritional supplements, and you can see, okay, so vitamins and minerals, that's the category this client is in. They make up nearly 2/5 of all nutritional supplement revenue, so it's a good thing, right? So you see other things there like, protein powder, which is more like a sports nutritional supplement, weight loss certainly. Those are some of the other products. So roughly 40% of all the revenue in nutritional supplements is from vitamins. Now, when we look at the actual content created about nutritional supplements on social media, we find that, so that's a type of vitamin here, but that is only making up, what is that, like 20% of the conversation. Basically what we're hearing is the people who talk about nutritional supplements are talking about weight loss supplements, they're talking about those sports protein nutritional supplements. So the people who are talking about supplements online are not talking about vitamins. So once again, we are able to go back to this client and say, yes, I recognize you want to tap into the conversation around vitamins on social media, but it's really not making up a large share of who's actually doing the talking right there. The people who have the loudest voices are like bodybuilders and dieters and weight losses, and that's not what your vitamin is targeted at. So again, we are able to demonstrate that what on its face sounds like a strong strategy, use social ambassadors to talk about your new product launch, is really not reaching as many people as you think.
I got a question regarding that. So the only problem with what I'm seeing is when I think about vitamins, there is no entertaining way to create a lot of, how can I say, content regarding, when we talk about
Cycles
social media.
around.
And when you talk about bodybuilders, weight loss, there isn't before, after kind of thing. It's visible, you can actually create a lot of content around it. In the case of vitamins, if I'm a vitamin company, it's hard for me to create content that is very relatable, that people will actually share or be. How can you go around that in that aspect of social media, for example?
So I imagine they had that exact same conversation and said, oh, let's hire this PR company to figure it out for us. And the reality is, you're right, it's really hard to talk about, like, what is the demonstrable impact of a vitamin when you take it every day. Like you said, bodybuilding is very obvious, weight loss is very obvious, but how do you talk about like a B3 supplement? Is that, I don't know if that's an actual vitamin, but how do you talk about calcium unless you are suffering from osteoporosis or something like that? So the strategy that we put in front of them really had very little to do with social media content. It was leveraging health and wellness bloggers, fitness trainers, like personal trainers, to act as brand ambassadors. It had to do with like big splashy events, like just basically just newsmakers. Like have a giant, one of the things that obviously they ended up doing was, just have a gigantic gummy vitamin out in, some central location in your launch cities and make, people taking pictures out of what is this gigantic gummy bear doing here in the middle, just to create buzz. So you're exactly right. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about on social media about a vitamin that either, I don't know what a vitamin does. Like it makes you not crash at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or just generally makes you feel healthier. But there's really no way to demonstrate that, that it kind of sings through social media. So that was another thing that we were able to share with them, as you say, is that our approach to it doesn't really, or should at least be living or anchored, I guess, in social media. Like sharing of blogger content is great, but actually anchoring it in social media is going to be a problem. Yeah.
But just to clarify what you said, that they weren't, if they weren't from this content graph, you said that they weren't targeting the right audience.
There's just not as much conversation as they thought. So, they're like, oh, we make up 40% of all the sales when it comes to nutritional supplements. Like vitamins are kind of the king of the nutritional supplement game. But it's kind of the complete opposite when it comes to how people actually talk about them on social media. So bodybuilders, there's a ton of bodybuilding content on social if you actually go to look for it. Like protein powders, what is that, 15%? And yet, bodybuilders and some of these other, like Plexus, all of those things, when you added them up, they were actually having a much stronger impact in social conversation.
Just based on the content,
vitamin.
is that why they have more?
Oh yeah, like exactly like you're saying, like it's very visual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very tight-knit community but it's like a built-in conversation, and this is how bodybuilders are communicating with each other. There's not necessarily a tight-knit gummy vitamin community where you and I are talking every day on Twitter or Instagram talking about, how awesome our vitamin D was that morning. So, and this is something that happens with brands a lot. Like, we have to use social media. We have to do something with Instagram because Instagram is hot and this is where everyone is. Well, no, you don't. And here's why. So that was all account planning, helping brands redefine who their target audience is, the actual strategic approach that we're going to take to talking about them. Talk now about optimization. So the reality is you can create a great strategy that sounds fantastic. You can dot all your I's, cross all your T's, but it can fail you. And if you're not tracking the results of your campaign mid-course, like during the actual life of your campaign, you are missing opportunities to optimize, either making a strategy that you knew would work well, work even better, or course correcting a really bad strategy and getting things back on track. I would say a lot of people don't really do optimization because clients are very scared of changing approaches in the middle of a campaign. They're putting hundreds of thousands to up to millions of dollars into something and to come in them and say, nope, I think we should switch the spend to this, or we should focus our resources here. A lot of clients aren't going to actually do that because they don't want to risk it, but it is still something that's very, very important. So here's a good case study. So this here is a pet care brand, not food, but some other type of pet care. It was pretty straightforward. They created a PSA that was supposed to go out via social media, and all they wanted was 500,000 video views and 5% post engagement rate. So this was like a smaller piece of a larger campaign. So pretty simple. Put this video on social media, get me 500,000 views and 5% of people engaging with it. Okay, fine, whatever. So we put it up. We did a paid post on Instagram and Facebook, and you can see here that if these here are like the actual numbers of people engaging, they're nowhere near 500,000, like not even close. We weren't even getting like 10% of what we were hoping to get as far as views. Never mind engagement, I think engagement was like 1.5%, 2% or something like that. So we came back to the client and said, okay, this video is supposed to run on social for 2 months and it's just not getting anywhere close to the actual engagement that you're hoping to get. What we want to do is take the dollars that we had originally earmarked for paid boosting posts on social media channel and actually partner with some bloggers, pay them to promote the video on their own channels and see if we can do better. So we partnered with three different bloggers, and each paid them to, or paid the cost for them to boost the post. So it was, if it cost $1,000 for them to boost the post, we paid that $1,000. They boosted it on their own channels. So essentially we stopped spending money on spreading it on Instagram and Facebook, focused it on these three particular bloggers, and the numbers just shot way up. We ended up getting like 16% engagement, exceeded our 500,000 views goal, but if we had not been tracking the actual performance of that video during the life of the campaign, we would have just rode this one out and like, we didn't get the fight, can't win them all. Kind of thing with the clients. But so applaud the client for being okay with shifting their dollars. This was like 10K, so not a lot of money, but they shifted their dollars, let us shift strategy, and we were able to achieve that 500,000 goal. All right, integration. So one of the biggest parts of my job as strategic planning, analytics, and research is reporting. It's building dashboards to demonstrate to clients that we've actually done what they've paid us to do. So I'll go in, if I'm as part of a pitch team with a client, I'm the one there talking about what their measurement and reporting strategy should look like, the types of things that we need to be measuring, the tools that we're going to bring to bear. And you can imagine the shift when, you remember the earlier slide I showed at the top of the presentation where maybe 5 years ago reporting was, here's your placements, here's your impression, and here's all the mastheads from the places that we got your article or the news coverage that you got. Now that's all still very important. You definitely want to demonstrate all the coverage that you're getting for your client, especially if it's a local market client. You want to demonstrate that you got a lot of local coverage. But data and analytics are really changing how we demonstrate the success of the work that we're doing. So financial services client, this is a bank. And the media results that if we had presented them in the old way, would have looked something like 375 media placements and 11 million impressions. Does that sound good?
Depends.
It depends, I have no idea. Like, if they had 100 placements last year and 2 million impressions, yeah, that was great. But I don't know, like, that's another thing about presenting this type of thing. It's completely lacking in context. I have no idea if that's good. Maybe it's awesome, maybe that's terrible. No clue. But we worked with this client to be able to switch up the way that we were actually reporting for them, and they were a great client because they actually gave us access to a lot of their digital analytics information, which some clients won't, because if they have a digital agency that deals with that, a lot of agencies don't like to play nice with each other, so that would mean giving us information that belongs to another agency. So now you see 375 placements, 11 million impressions. We have 100% message penetration, so that means every single one of those placements mentioned one of the key messages that we had identified for this particular bank. 90% positive tonality, the other 10 was neutral. Those media placements sparked 1,200 social media posts. 1,000 people used the bank's hashtag, 1,300% increase in social media brand mentions. The number of Instagram followers went way up. They had a #1 trending hashtag in the Boston region for the day of their launch. The website that we built for this particular campaign got 4,600 views, and people spent 3.5 minutes on the page. So suddenly now we have a lot more quality impressions. We're showing that the media placements that we did garner contained key messages. They drove social sharing of those messages to the point where people were actually starting to follow you on Instagram, and they were clicking the link backs in the publications to visit your campaign website or going there organically, and spending over 3 minutes on the particular page. So that sounds way better than 375 placements and 11 million impressions, which again is good, maybe, I don't know. So what we report nowadays is I'm really pushing clients to spend more time here and less time way down there. So if you were to ignore the media, social, and digital, I would group these types of results as, like, you've probably heard this, outputs, which are, that's like what I just call it like checkmark PR. It's basically a task list of what you asked us, what you paid us to do, and we're checking the box that you did it. So you paid us to get you media. Check. So those are outputs. The middle column is outcomes. What did the intended audience do as a result of what we, the PR team, did? So these are the audience behaviors. And then impact is how is it impacting the bottom line for the company. Yes.
A quick question. So when you say media, like you mean like print media? Like say I wanted to target like a magazine to like do a placement. Could then I target their social media too?
That's what we, oftentimes when we do target media, we don't target print or online, we target an outlet. So think of like Cosmo.
Okay.
Like if we get a placement in Cosmo, it's great if we get the magazine, the online, and all of their social channels.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's just you pitch a person there and you get one of those.
Okay.
You know, if you actually want the print magazine placement, so that's called a long lead hit placement because they print those editorial calendars like a year in advance, you have to start pitching something a year to 9 months in advance. You know, sometimes we're moving so fast in this world that we're going to actually miss the print publication, but we can do online, you know, a couple weeks out, and anything that appears online is likely to also appear on their social properties. So we get those 2 different placements. And nowadays, we're just pitching the social media people at publication. So we'll just pitch Cosmo's Instagram account owner because getting something on their social channels is going to get a lot more exposure than getting something in their magazine.
What other digital products are there besides the unique page views and the time on the page?
So there's a lot of digital analytics. Some of them are like your site journey. So after going to a certain page on your website, where else are they going on your website? So that's a good one. Any site that's an e-com site, we can actually demonstrate that the inbound referral, so the visit to the website, originated from someone clicking on the link in a media article that we placed, and we can follow their journey all the way to purchasing something on the website. So that's like the holy grail. It doesn't happen very often because
Say that one more time.
okay. So if I get a placement in the Boston Globe that has a link to my vitamin company, and someone clicks on that link, if you look at the analytics for that company's website, it'll tell me, oh look, this person's journey on this site originated from a Boston Globe article. And they went all the way and purchased a bottle of vitamins. Now I like to caution you because, and I don't want to go against anything that you may have been taught, but PR really isn't a sales, like it's not designed to drive sales. That's more in the marketing world. Yes, PR can contribute to sales, but we're really more of a reputation game. So to have to demonstrate that PR contributed to sales is kind of a losing proposition. We're more about behavior change, building advocates and loyalty toward a brand, overall brand reputation. That's where most of our metrics actually do the best. But when it comes to digital metrics, one of my favorite things is to demonstrate the number of people who go to your website because they've clicked on a link from a PR placement.
Well, I was just gonna say, codes, like we realize that codes a lot the best way for us to measure the impact of like an advertisement that we've done or anything is codes we do with influencers.
Mm-hmm.
Like discount codes, they are
Oh, yeah.
amazing to give it in terms of knowing exactly how much did you spend and how much did that cost, like how much did you spend and how much did that bring you in sales specifically from that specific influencer. It's
Yeah.
a good way of measuring it.
It's easy to do that with influencers. Again, that whole ROI approach is very much more of a marketing advertising thing than it is a PR thing. But yes, with influencers it's very easy. So imagine if you hire 10 bloggers to post about you and you know exactly how much you've paid each blogger, you can actually put like a tracking code on their website, and you can then see how many people interacted with that content, went from that content to your website. And then yes, with an influencer, because you know if you spent $2,000 to get them to promote your product, you can look at exactly how much you got in return. So those types of ROI are pretty easy in very small, contained executions, but PR overall is more concerned with the long game, and like imagine brand tracking studies year over year to see if perception has changed about your brand, or if people like net promoter scores, are people more likely to recommend your product, those types of things. And that's not something that can be done, you know, after a 6-week campaign. It's like I've had a client who, I think it was a client with us for like 8 years, and we did 4 brand tracking studies with them over that amount of time just to measure an increase in positive impressions. I mean, 8 years, it's a long time. Okay. Validation, this is a new one, this one's really fun. So every year, Cone, and now as part of Porter Novelli, puts out a series of research that helps demonstrate the consumers' attitudes and behaviors toward companies that support social and environmental issues. So we, since 1993, we have like the gold standard in research in this particular space about consumers willing to, we've demonstrated consumers are willing to switch products to buy one that supports a social or environmental cause. Consumers expect company to support these kinds of issues. And the last couple of years, we've been focusing more not on consumers' expectations of companies, but the types of ways that consumers emotionally connect to brands when they support social and environmental causes. And so we had research that came out and said, well, the stuff that you can read there, when a brand supports a social or environmental cause, people are more loyal, they have a stronger emotional connection, proud to be associated. Basically, they'll wear, the brand logo on their clothing, and that they believe companies that do support social and environmental issues care more about them as people. So excuse me. So when we put this research out, and we've experienced this in the past, it's really, really easy for people to start poking holes in it because this is a survey. And so the first thing someone will do is raise their hand and say, okay, that's self-reported data. How can you actually prove that? It sounds great, but in a survey, people are just going to tell you exactly what they want you to hear. So what we started doing, more of the data there. What we started doing last year, really cool, using social analytics, is we looked at just a handful of industries, and the example I have up here is outdoor retail. We looked at a handful of industries, and we looked at one brand that does not have any real demonstrable social or environmental issues, or at least they don't talk about them. They may support them, but they don't really talk about them as part of their brand. So we have an example of a brand that doesn't really do any of that, so that's Cabela's in this case. And again, maybe they do have issues, they just don't talk about it as part of their brand. We looked at REI. Do you guys remember when REI said we're going to close all of our stores on Black Friday so that our employees can go get outside? So they had their Opt Outside campaign. It's a really big campaign. And then we looked at Patagonia, who you may have heard. Patagonia has spoken out very vociferously against the administration and wanting to trim back public lands. So those are our three examples. Cabela, who's not really talking up anything around supporting social issues. REI, which has a really strong campaign around Opt Outside. And then Patagonia, which is what we would define as a purpose brand, a brand whose own persona is not distinct from its support of social and environmental issues. So when you think Patagonia, you automatically think of a brand that supports social issues. Ben & Jerry's is another example of a purpose brand. So what we did is we looked at how people were talking about these brands on social media. And so when we looked at Cabela's, which was our example, I want to say non-purpose, but I don't mean that pejoratively, our non-purpose brand, okay, people just talked about, we got product, I assume this is Dick's Sporting Goods, following some of the types of things that you could purchase there. So this was very much a product sales related conversation happening around Cabela's on social media. So then we looked at how people talk about REI. And this was in May, June, so not anywhere near Black Friday, and yet people still talked about the Opt Outside campaign. So now we're starting to see, okay, when a brand supports a social or environmental issue, people actually talk about that as a matter of course when speaking about that brand. So of course they also will mention some product things and some influencers, but they're also talking about their campaigns, their social campaigns. And then we looked at Patagonia. And Patagonia's conversation was all about its support of social issues. So whatever side you fall on that particular issue, Patagonia got a lot of praise and a lot of not praise for supporting that issue, but people talk about it. So this is not in any way measuring the tone of conversation, positive or negative. People talk about Patagonia and its support of social or environmental issues very much so, more so than they're talking about REI, which just has that one campaign. And we also start to see that they're using more emotional specific words like good. So if you think back to the data that we had shared when we talk about people are more loyal, they have a stronger emotional connection. What we were able to determine was brands that are purpose-led, people are constantly talking about that brand in connection to their social issue and often saying, using emotional words when talking about them, good, love, hate, if that's that particular brand. Whereas brands that don't talk about their support of these issues have a very product-focused online conversation. So the conversation exists more at the particular product level as opposed to up at the higher brand level. So I know that was kind of complex, and we had a whole 70-slide presentation about that. But I just thought that was really cool because we were able to take the survey data that people like to poke holes on and actually demonstrate using social analytics that, okay, we can actually start to prove out our point a little bit more in the way people are talking about this brand. And this year, the next round of this research, I think it comes out in like May. It's gonna be really cool. We're gonna start using some biometric research. So like, imagine wearing like pulse meters when you're looking at purpose ads and like little like headgear to measure people's emotional response to purpose and non-purpose advertisements. So very cool. We don't know what the outcomes will actually be, but we're going to be supplementing this research with those techniques this year. Yes.
Are you outsourcing the biometric work that you guys are doing?
Yes,
Are you
absolutely.
going to Nielsen?
No, Nielsen is very difficult to get in touch with. No, it's HCD. It's one of the companies, but yes, HCD, Nielsen, and iMotion are kind of one of the three big companies that are starting. And then it's like a new field now, so it's not completely proven. I don't want to get off track of analytics, but it's exciting, and honestly, part of the reason we're pursuing it is kind of the medium is the message. It's just going to be cool that we're doing it before we even see what the results are.
It kind of adds to your value proposition to new customers as well, right? In addition to all this other stuff I'm going to give you, we're also going to give you this other new data.
Yeah, so it's essentially going to be like they're going to look at 2 ads. So a lot of it is around Super Bowl ads. They're going to look at 2 ads, like a non-purpose one and a purpose one, and we're just going to measure the difference in response. So that's, I guess I forgot this one. We were able to demonstrate that Cabela's has a lot of product-focused consumers, but when you start to support social issues, where are my liberal activists, you tap into new types of consumers there. So obviously liberal activists do not follow Cabela's. So I just want to leave you with this. Ultimately, data, it leads smarter thinking, better programs, and more client return, which means more money, more clients for you.
Okay.
Yes.
Your presentation seemed to be based on business to consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what the changes are when it's business to business?
Yeah, and honestly, it's interesting you bring that up because we have a lot of B2B clients. I use B2C just because the industries are more exciting to look at. But when you sit in my seat, it doesn't really look a lot different. You have a target audience. Now, for some clients, it may be a consumer. For some clients, it may be like, recycling stakeholders. You know what I mean? Either way, you're still trying to find an insight about that target audience and develop a strategy that reaches them directly, and then demonstrate that you actually did it. So while you can talk to maybe the people who sit in our CSR teams and do a lot of B2B work versus the people who sit in our brand comm teams who do a lot of B2C work, it's no different for me. The tools still work because we're still trying to diagnose the actual target audience and the problem or the insight that's going to be able to help us reach them. And we're still building out dashboards and reporting mechanisms to be able to demonstrate that audience. So if it's like a B2B consumer, we might be using words a lot like stakeholder, or if it's B2B client, we might be using a lot of stakeholder versus consumer, and we might be measuring like new business leads or conference presentations and information like that. But at the end of the day, it's still demonstrating an actual behavior change as opposed to vanity metrics. Do you have a specific example or question?
Yes. I think it might be better the whole 80-20 rule if I had 5 minutes after the
Sure.
presentation maybe. But when you go business to business, the social media portion of what you're isn't overly applicable anymore, right?
Oh yeah, so social media is not
So then you're talking media and the digital products specifically on
So
what
there's
drives
still a
the
lot
value
of digital.
proposition.
Yeah. And like I said, with the B2B work, at least that we do at Cone, is very much corporate social responsibility focused. So we're looking at like trade media in the sustainability space, or we're looking at measuring thought leadership. So are you speaking from the podium at a sustainable brands conference or a series conference? When people are writing about a certain social issue, are they coming to you as a spokesperson, or are they including your brand as an example of a company that's doing that kind of work? It can often also be inward focused and have to do a lot with employee engagement, in which case we're using a lot of surveys to measure
Self-reporting
morale. Yeah, exactly. And then we do listening sessions, kind of a fancy word for an informal focus group. So the tools are really more survey-based, listening session-based, but there's still a lot of dashboarding around places where you're showing up, the types of ways people are talking, the trade media and stakeholders are talking about your brand, who is engaging with you, and we mean like interpersonally engaging with you. And so it's a complete, as you say, it's a completely different set of measures. There's a lot more surveys involved, but at the end of the day, it's the point I'm trying to make is it's kind of all the same to me. I don't use a different like theoretical approach to it. It's just a different set of metrics.
What software do you use to build your dashboards?
So, I mean, it runs the gamut from clients who are on the low end of the budget. I mean, it's just Excel, literally just in a static Excel base, to ones where we can use data visualization tools like Power BI or Tableau just to make them shareable. We don't do a lot of work with like live databases. It's mostly flat files, just because the end client that we're working with isn't that sophisticated technology, like data technology wise. They don't have access to be able to read that information. So we can do everything from like a $10K a month client in Excel to $1 million clients who have more live ones.
Andrea, just wanted to ask if you could go back a couple of minutes to the social listening, the last one that you had on. Yes, that one there.
This one here?
Yes. So what has happened here is clusters of influencers in these various areas on social media have been identified. One of the questions that I wondered, do you actually do the social listening yourself, or do you work with Signal Labs or one of the big companies?
Yeah, so it's both. So this particular company is called Affinio, AFFINIO. Is it? Yeah, it's down there, listed on the
Because
bottom.
I wanted the students to understand that there are companies out there.
Oh gosh, yeah, we have a
Yeah.
huge roster of, I mean, from a social listening, we work with companies called Talkwalker and Brandwatch, and I don't know if these mean anything to you. Talkwalker, Brandwatch, Affinio.
I just
The names are all
wanted
escaping
them-
me. Yeah, but I'm like working within tools
Right.
all day long to
Right.
create these types of outputs. Yeah.
Right, but they are the companies that are actually gathering the data for you. But you are.
I mean, you can do it manually,
Yes.
and oftentimes for traditional media, while there are companies who will do this, who will do media audits
Right.
automated, I defer to traditional media audits manually.
Right.
But social is just too
It's huge.
big. And
Yes.
even saying that, any client that wants us to track sentiment of social mentions, I always do that manually. I never rely on any of the tools to track social sentiment. It's too, it's just not close to accurate. So, I mean, there are clients who are spending thousands of dollars a month just for someone to sit and like assign positive, negative, neutral values to every single social mention.
Because that's very time consuming and labor intensive to approach the collection of data in that way when you're doing it
Yeah. And that's a good point, because if you're going to get into this field, you're going to have to be the kind of person who likes those time-consuming. I mean, you could spend a day just sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet, going
Right.
through one by one, and that's just the nature of this particular job. So, you know, if that's not something you can see yourself doing, I think it's great to be analytics enabled, but it's probably going to be difficult for you to spend a long time in a data or analytics field if you're not comfortable sitting and looking at data for large periods of time.
And the creative aspect of it is the translation into the
Yeah.
visuals, right? Wouldn't you say?
So we rely on the products to do a lot of the visual
Okay.
translations for us. So, you know, we'll input the social information into here and it creates the clusters for us. So oftentimes it's the products that are doing a lot of the data visualization, because our creative teams are spending time, you know, developing logos and executions. You know, they're not gonna be doing this work.
Okay, that is it. I wanted them to be able to understand that there is one other piece, you know, that you have engaged with you in the
Yeah.
data collection.
I mean, yeah, when it comes to these types of data visualizations, like I don't want to, Excel is still a great tool. I mean, it's kind of boring and old school sounding compared to some of the data visualization things that are out here today, but I mean, Excel is still fantastic. It still does everything. It might take you a little bit longer, but it's going to be cheaper for some clients, and it's still a very basic tool that anyone in data and analytics needs to excel in. And you know, there's great YouTube tutorials and, you know, classes that you can take for free or inexpensively online, but Excel is something that you should be very, very comfortable using.
How
on
many
a
of you
daily
are
basis.
familiar with the basics of Excel?
Yeah, so,
Okay, that's
like,
good to know, thank you.
yeah, I mean, definitely, I mean, it's advanced formulas and pivot charts, all of that. And like I said, there's YouTube videos if you want to get more comfortable. It's, you know, it's not, I don't have a degree in statistics, I'm not an
Right.
economist, you know, these are things I get asked all the time. You know, I don't have a mathematics background, I have a communication research background, but you can still do this. Now there are people who like go to school and get PhDs in data science, and they're the ones who are actually building out the massive databases that these tools live off of. Like, that's a completely different quality.
So would you say in communication, what would they need to know beyond Excel to work in this area?
You would need to be comfortable with native social insights tools, which I know it's tough because unless you're owning like a social media business page, you can't really access that. So it's kind of a learn on the job internship type of thing. But you're going to need to be comfortable reading a Facebook Insights report or a Twitter Analytics report, all of those, and then. Very early on in your career or in internships, you're going to want to be exposed to and comfortable with all of the social listening
Right.
tools.
Right.
And again, most colleges don't have subscriptions to that, so it's really tough. You're not going to get that kind of experience. You know, you'll get the really, really strong theoretical background in the classroom, but then you need the internship practical experience to get
Right.
those,
Right.
get familiarity with those tools.
Because it's so expensive, colleges and universities
Oh, yeah.
even can't afford to have access to those large databases.
Which is why we make our clients pay for them. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But they need to understand that, and that's a really good suggestion to do it in an internship, maybe in an agency like the agency you
Yep.
work for, Cone, or one of the other agencies. This is a key skill. Is there anything else they should be aware of? Your research skills are excellent, so can
Yeah,
you
so that's
speak
kind of
to-
another side of the coin. And I don't know if you offer a
We do
communication
have
research
they all have to take a communication research course before they do their capstone. And the
Okay.
capstone can be an internship,
Mhm.
or we have a couple of other options. But they need to take the communication research course before that.
Yeah, so that's a completely different discipline, which has a lot of, I mean, they're both very much related. I mean, this last case study that I showed you kind of shows how they're related. I have a background in both. I would say a lot of people don't, and that's completely fine. Like, we have just researchers at the agency and just analysts at the agency, and honestly, those people who specialize in one area are probably much deeper on both of those topics, where I live more up at the strategy and client management level. I mean, a lot of those people are the ones like doing a lot of the programming. But so for research, I found, at least in my graduate program, the research had more access to the tools. I mean, you just need an SPSS license. SPSS, if you're not familiar with it, is just, it's basically a way of analyzing survey results and, you know, creating cross tabulations so you can understand how many people said X or, you know, said Y about something. A lot of the people who come in have had experience with SPSS in college, so in a way, if you go through the research track, you're a little bit more at an advantage because you have the tools, and really the only thing you're learning on the job are some of the DIY programming platforms like Qualtrics.
Right.
But even if you like just explored SurveyMonkey long enough, you would already know half of what Qualtrics can
Right.
offer.
Right.
So yeah, part of my time, I actually happen to be working on a lot of research projects right now, so writing a lot of surveys or developing focus group guidelines. You know, it's just a different track to pursue, but it's the right time to be pursuing either of those tracks
Right.
when it comes to communication.
Do you use any software for the qualitative research that you elicit from the focus groups?
The only time we would use software is if it were an online focus group. So like you might have heard of it called as a bulletin board. So the moderator, instead of standing up in front of the room and, you know, saying, now why did you select that example? It's all done online in a room, and it's just they're typing the question in, and then the participants respond that way.
Right.
You would need software to conduct it, but it's not as much of an analysis tool for the qualitative as it is for the quantitative.
Right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask so many questions, but I wanted you to know what you need to learn and what you need to be familiar with. Let's go back to the students to see if there's any students that have questions.
Yes.
Well, she actually asked one of my questions earlier, but I'm actually an undergraduate student, and I see a lot of advertisements, particularly on LinkedIn, about data analytics courses.
Mhm.
Would you recommend at all trying to take one of those?
Oh yeah, I've taken, not LinkedIn, but I know the name's gonna escape me, but there's a lot of statistics or programming data courses that are offered online that are, you know, maybe $10. Now I can't believe the name is escaping me, some of these courses, but yeah, LinkedIn is one of them. Google offers a set of courses, and then, is it Khan Academy?
There's ADX.
There's a number of similar ones like that are just like online, like SQL or Python programming tutorial. Those are great. A lot of them aren't that expensive. Some are free, and when it's a very, very, very practical skill, it's not often offered in a college setting because, you know, like I said, there's not a lot of theory behind it, but it's just a matter of getting the basics down. I think all of those are excellent things, and I've done them myself.
How do you see AI affecting the industry?
What did you ask, Rosa?
AI.
The effect of
What?
AI on the industry? Artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Oh, right, artificial intelligence, right.
Right now we're doing a lot more with VR. AI is still kind of, there's a lot of like conferences and webinars on it because it's the next thing that may or may not affect our industry. I would say the closest we've come to actually integrating it is when we used IBM Watson. I don't know, it's difficult because I can't think of any specific use cases, but if it comes to things like handling huge tasks like scraping all of Google to understand search behavior, I've always wanted to do something like that. Even in a more frivolous way, I was one of our juvenile products clients, baby products, I wanted to do an infographic that showed the most searched for baby registry item in every single state. And I was like, I just want to write a code so I can scrape all of Google and see what people are searching for, and I want to do it in every single state. And there's ways to get close to it right now. Google Trends, yeah, is the closest thing you can get. But I could see AI having a much more robust, sophisticated solution. So right now, I imagine it's going to come down to like massive database scraping is the next way it's going to impact PR. So we're just going to have that much more behavioral information about what people are doing online. I would say it's prohibitively expensive to all but maybe 5 companies in the entire world right now, and until someone solves for that, someone who's probably going to drop out of Harvard in a minute, until that person solves for it, it's going to be very much theoretical in how we're thinking about it, but yeah, it's definitely on the horizon. Virtual reality, somewhat related, is something that we're integrating a lot into our executions and how we have people interact with products.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that your customers are or have the ability to log into your dashboards and verify or look at data ad hoc. Do you find that changing the way that you're structuring your contracts and invoices? Because you mentioned a client can pick up the phone and ask a question that's now outside of the life cycle which you were working on, so it's different.
Yeah, you're talking about scope creep.
Right.
Which means when we write a scope saying, here's exactly what we're going to do, we're going to charge you this much money, and then you ask us to do something that's outside of that.
Right, which they normally wouldn't do if they didn't have that insight.
Yeah, but scope creep has been around since the beginning of time. I don't think it's changed the way we've structured contracts. If anything, I'm trying to push clients toward, rather than a specific amount of money assigned to a specific analytics task, like just having a bucket of what I call SPAR money. Like, we're just going to say, here's your contract, and then add 10% on top of that, and it can just be spent on SPAR. And however the client wants, they can do a survey, they can do audience analysis, consumer journey, they can do a dashboard, whatever. So I'm trying to shift people toward more like having money set aside for something, as opposed to saying, we know that it takes exactly this many hours to do your average reporting, and you need to pay that in fee plus this much to use the tool, because clients will scope creep as much as possible. I would say the ones who have login access to dashboards tend to be more often on a retainer. The more clients have, the more likely they are to be on a retainer. So, you can kind of fit it within the ask. If it becomes something big, then you just have to turn around another scope. I mean, there's a certain amount of goodwill that you'll invest in the client, but then at some point you just have to turn around a new scope. So if anything, it's probably created new scopes, but I don't think it's yet affected like the contract or the master services agreement.
Okay, are you invoicing monthly, or is it by milestone, or is it you
so
pay
to
when the job's
access
done?
the tools, yeah, it's usually a monthly invoice, like from $500 on the low end up to thousands of dollars. Yeah, they pay monthly for those. And it used to be, like 10 years ago, having these tools was just cost of doing business. You never charged clients to have this tool. Like your PR company, you're just supposed to have this available, but now it's so expensive, there's so much that you can do with them that we don't bring a single client on today who doesn't pay for this, and it would have to be negotiated out at the highest level
Right.
if they weren't paying for this.
And you guys doing firm fixed price contracts?
I mean, it's, a lot of it is dependent on the work we do, yeah, it's, some are bill actual, I prefer the fixed price, fixed fee. And a lot of the work I have, I can charge project fees for, but a typical account work is more bill actual work.
So you were talking about your CSR work. Is that just in-house generally what you do, or is that a separate section of
So Cone
responsibilities?
itself has always been very well known for corporate social responsibility. Our original founder, Carol Cone, kind of founded what was called cause branding, the idea of a company partnering with a nonprofit. I think you'll play Save Lids to Save Lives. It's a very early example. So we've always been incredibly well known and a thought leader in that space, but we've also always done brand marketing, consumer marketing. Porter Novelli bought us because they wanted to build out their CSR expertise, what they're now calling purpose. So much of that work goes through the Boston office. However, other brand marketing, we have tech. When the Porter Novelli Boston office merged with the Cone office, we took on the tech practice. Obviously, there's a lot of tech and biotech here in the Boston area. So it's just, I work across all of that. Kind of like I was saying before, it's all the same to me.
Yeah.
But we have dedicated account teams across across all of those disciplines: healthcare, tech, bio, all consumer, it's purpose.
So just generally, how important do you think it is to grasp the corporate social responsibility aspects of a position or of an organization?
I mean,
in
it's
the data analytics side, if that's what you're going into, how much of that do you think falls into what you need to know?
It's a tough question because I feel like I've learned so much of it from osmosis, just being there. I don't know that you necessarily need to understand CSR if you want to specialize in data and analytics and then say get a job at the Boston office, because we do a lot of CSR.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand what it generally means,
Right,
you know, and recognize that when Budweiser advertises during the Super Bowl saying we're making all of our beer with wind energy, to generally recognize, oh, they're obviously doing that.
Yeah.
But the more, I also think though that there is an opportunity, at least within Porter Novelli, to kind of develop out a little like center of excellence around purpose analytics. So one of the products that that I just helped create is a tool that we can take to companies who are trying to determine whether to wade into a very divisive social justice issue. So think like transgender rights, immigration. So this is not should I support climate change. This is like extremely divisive, hot topic.
Like all the things Lush supports?
Like all the things that are in the news, like when you open the paper, if anyone actually opens a paper anymore, and read about today. So, you know, it's the expectation from many consumers that companies do wade into those issues, and companies are naturally very apprehensive about doing so. We've developed a product that helps make the decision a very objective one, because it's often not. It's often like a CEO, and she says that we need to support women's rights or, you know, LGBTQ rights, and the rest of the company doesn't know whether that's the right decision to make, or your consumers are telling you that you need to support a particular issue. So we develop a tool that's, I mean, it's essentially a survey, but it scores how you respond to a certain number of questions, and then gives you a bunch of different outcomes that you could pursue based upon how you score. That's not something I probably would have been able to develop without knowing a lot about purpose.
Right.
But I've been sitting in a purpose company for 12 years, so like I said, a lot of it just kind of rubs off on me, right, because I'm exposed to it on a regular basis. So I could comfortably talk about it from the podium, but I would never put a strategy together for anyone around CSR. I'm the wrong person for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'm waiting for one of you to ask if Cone or Porter Novelli has internships.
I just looked at the hiring page today and I do see intern there.
Hello.
Listed.
You have to do some sort of an exit strategy, and that might be a good one.
Yes, we do offer paid internships. I believe they must be semester long. Yeah, they're roughly 6 months and in length, and so you can sit across a handful of different types of accounts, getting exposed to all the different areas. Like I said, we have healthcare, we have tech, we have consumer, we have purpose. And I will say that most of our data analytics internships sit in our DC and New York offices. That said, I do grab intern time whenever I see it available.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So shall we all say thank you?
Thank you.
Very much.
Stick around for a few minutes.
We really
Thank you so much.
appreciate your coming and explaining this to everyone and answering all the questions. Did everyone learn something new tonight? Yes. And thank you so much.